Good morning, good afternoon and good evening everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar on UK-Japan digital cooperation, 5G and beyond. We've got a wonderful panel, and I'm going to introduce a little bit of context and the panel after we've heard from our first speaker, who I will introduce without further ado. Matt Warman is the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State at the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, a position he's held since 2019. Prior to that, he was Assistant Government Whip from earlier in 2019. Minister, welcome. I would like you to give your introductory remarks, as we know our time with you is limited, and then I will come on and introduce the panel and the context and all of the other housekeeping. So with that, Minister, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Emily, and good morning to those joining us from the UK, and good evening to those in Japan. I was delighted to be offered the opportunity to deliver some opening remarks for this event today, ahead of what I'm sure is going to be a really fruitful discussion on what's a really, really important and relevant topic. While it's a shame that today's discussion can't take place in person, the fact that in a global pandemic we can continue to hold events such as these remotely and with international partners is just one example of how much we've come to rely on digital technologies to work, to play, and to connect with loved ones and colleagues around the world. And crucially, it has also highlighted the importance of having confidence in our networks and the digital infrastructure that underpins them. I think we are all aware of the potential benefits that investment in 5G and full fibre networks can bring to citizens and economies across the world, but we must be equally aware and alive to the risks to these networks and their supply chains. The UK is taking a proactive approach to ensure we can have the confidence in the security and the resilience of our telecoms critical national infrastructure. That work started in earnest with the Telecom supply chain review, and it has continued with the introduction of the Telecom Security Bill to Parliament and the publication of the government's 5G supply chain diversification strategy in November last year. Through this work, we will have implemented one of the strongest frameworks in the world for telecom security, increasing security standards across the industry as a whole, including both telecoms operators and equipment suppliers. But this issue is not just about security. In addition to this framework, we've set out to address one of the most challenging issues facing the sector, and that's the current lack of effective competition and choice in the telecommunications access market through our 5G supply chain diversification strategy. There is, of course, an inherent security and resilience risk that comes with having to rely on just a few individual suppliers, and I know countries everywhere are grappling with this issue. But today, I'd like to focus on the opportunities that addressing this market challenge can bring. Because fundamentally, we do have an opportunity here to work with industry and international partners to find solutions to this challenge, to take collective action to grow the market and to make it more competitive and more diverse. Events like this one provide an excellent platform to start the conversation, raising awareness to the scale of the challenge. And we should be absolutely clear that addressing the lack of diversity in the telecom supply chain will by no means be an easy task. But such events also provide an opportunity to highlight those areas of common interest between industry, academia, and international partners, where we can work together to make progress. The UK government believes we need to open up the supply chain to achieve a long-term vision for a global telecom supply market with greater diversity and competition. But that's a vision that will not only apply to 5G networks, but will be relevant to future generations as well. But we know the UK cannot do this alone. Collective action and collaboration will be essential to this work, and delivering the lasting and meaningful change we believe is necessary will require a concerted effort from a wide range of international partners. We want to drive the conversation forward onto the international stage. So we're delighted that close partners like the Japanese government, who I know have already taken proactive steps to promote the take-up of open architectures and interoperability, are working with us on this already. And we look forward to strengthening our collaboration to drive this agenda. Commitments by Japanese companies to invest in the UK telecoms market, such as the announcements already made by NEC, demonstrate that there is already momentum for telecoms diversification from industry. We recognise, however, that there is more work to do to convince other international partners that diversification is necessary. The work we are doing together on diversification through the G7 is an important first step in building global consensus on this issue. And as part of this work, we hope to agree a landmark set of principles that will underpin a future diversified global supply chain. To deliver on these principles, we will ensure that we work in lockstep with the industry to overcome the current barriers to diversification and open up the market over the longer term. Government, industry and academia all have an opportunity to help deliver real change to the betterment of the market, not only for the deployment of current generation communications technologies, but well into the future. This won't be easy, but I'm confident that if we work together, we can deliver meaningful and lasting change that benefits the security and resilience of our telecoms critical national infrastructure. So to close, I'd like to reiterate my thanks for allowing me to come and deliver these short remarks at this event today. And I'm disappointed that I can't stay for the whole discussion, as this is a really interesting and challenging issue with some really fantastic speakers, because events like these are the perfect opportunity to showcase the good work that is already going on while shining a light on areas where more work is needed and helping to chart a course forward. So I look forward to working with you all in the future on these important issues, and hopefully soon we'll be able to meet to discuss them in person too. So with that, thank you, Emily, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Do you have time for a very quick question before leaving us, or are you
Why
on your
not?
way?
Yes, go for it.
So thank you for setting the scene so beautifully and mentioning the importance of diversification, but also how the internet has been there for us during the pandemic. Do you feel any concerns that, closing off particular companies or the sort of politicization of what was previously, very much a technical issue could actually end up putting barriers and restrictions in the way of the free flow of data? And how are you going to address those risks in your strategies?
So I think there's sort of two separate questions there, aren't there? There is a question about the increasing parliamentary interest, if you like, and the increasing politicization of telecoms networks as a lens through which people see a broader global conversation. And then there's a separate question about the free flow of data. And I'm conscious that it's not a question that's easy to answer in 2 minutes. But on that first point, it's really important that we have a clear-eyed relationship with other countries, whether that's China, whether that's other countries that are involved in this market. Of course it is, but it's also really important that we have a focused conversation on what we are really talking about when it comes to telecoms security and diversification. And I think what you saw in the parliamentary debates over the telecom security bill was both an increasing willingness amongst parliamentarians to want to talk about global geopolitics, but also a recognition that you do have to focus on the specific issue at hand when it comes to telecom security. So I think people are in Parliament and around the world are realistic about those two discrete but overlapping challenges. And then separately, on that question of what model do we want for the internet, I think the UK government has always been very much on the side of that open, liberal set of values that we've seen right from Tim Berners-Lee in inventing the web. Now, I think there are questions over the regulation of particularly the largest companies are operating online, but that shouldn't be taken as in any way undermining the UK government's commitment to making sure that citizens have the maximum control over their own data and that companies are not able to take advantage in a way that is not to the benefit of the market or to the benefit of those citizens.
Minister, thank you very much for your remarks and for taking a question, for opening this event today. Thank you. I will now move on, if I may.
Thank you.
And wish you a very good day and a good evening to people in Japan.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us, Minister. So we have a really wonderful panel here today. I'm going to introduce in a bit, but just to as it's stated in the event outline, and as the Minister remarked, we're all in the middle of a pandemic. We are all increasingly reliant on the internet to enable us to do our daily work. We have seen over the last couple of years that there have been increasing security concerns over infrastructure providers. The Minister didn't use the H word or mention any particular company or supplier, but that is implicit in the decisions that countries are having to make here. So how do we maintain that free flow of data? How do we capitalize on the shared values between Japan and the UK? How do we achieve greater security without compromising on the freedoms, on the free flow of data, without putting immovable objects into the network? So just a little bit of housekeeping. Please do ask questions at any time. Use the Q&A function which you will find at the bottom right-hand side of your screen to type any questions you may have, and then I will be able to put them to the panel. We're going to start with introductory remarks from each of the panel, and then a little bit of back and forth between ourselves before opening up the floor to questions. So to introduce our panel, first speaker will be Dr. Alexi Drew, who is a research associate at the Policy Institute at King's College London, and an associate at the Global Network on Extremism and Technology. Also an executive manager at the European Cyber Conflict Research Initiative. Her work focuses on emerging technologies, international norms, and the impact of geopolitics on the network. Alexi is also a member of the Women in International Security and a mentor for Girls Society. Welcome, Dr. Drew. Next, we will have the Right Honourable Baroness Pauline Neville Jones, DCMG, who is a Conservative peer in the House of Lords, but it's okay. She's said that we can call her Pauline for today. She sits currently on the Joint Committee on National Security Strategy, following an illustrious career spanning diplomacy. She has been Minister for Security and Counter-Terrorism, a member of the National Security Council, Prime Minister's Special Representative to Business for Cybersecurity until 2014. And she has also been, amongst a number of other roles, she has been chairman of the technology company Kinetic. Welcome. Today, Scott Bailey is Deputy Director for Telecom's Diversification in the UK's Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. And we just heard from his boss, Matt Warman. He has been a civil servant for 10 years and worked across a number of departments, including Cabinet Office and other departments. From Japan, this evening we have Mitsuhiro Hishida, who is senior government official of Japan with more than 25 years of professional career in ICT policy. He was appointed to the Deputy Director General for International Economic Affairs of the Global Strategy Bureau for the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications in 2019. And prior positions have included Director for ICT Deployment and Industry Promotion, NICT, Director of a Multilateral Economic Affairs Office at the same ministry. And he has contributed to negotiations across numerous international fora, including the OECD, World Trade Organization, and others. So welcome, Hishida-san. And last but not least, from industry, President and CEO of NEC Europe Limited, Chris Jackson, who has direct responsibility for the European operation. Previously, he has been Vice President of NEC's telecommunications carrier business, as well as Vice President of the Partner Alliance and Services business for EMEA. So his focus over the last 25 years has been on sales, delivery and transformation. So very much an industry voice in the mix this morning. Welcome to all of you. Dr. Drew, maybe I could turn to you first for your opening remarks. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for such a wonderful introduction, Emily, and thank you to yourself and everyone else at Chatham House for this opportunity to talk about a subject which has become, I would say, painfully close to my heart over the last couple of years, from right before this strange new world that we now live in began all the way through it, and probably likely to continue onwards from there. I would like to really build on the comments that the Minister just left us with, in that we find ourselves in this field continually looking, particularly in mine, looking at risks. I'm a security researcher by trade, so risk is our go-to, but I want to kind of talk about the opportunities that our realization of risk has actually given us. So the spike of interest that came about, perhaps resting on 5G and telecoms, has actually presented us with quite a number of opportunities that we've begun, I think, to finally actually make use of. And first of all, one of these, most fundamentally, represented by several in this call today, is diversification. From the risk that we've noted with regards to telecoms and the need for diversification as a strategy for securing that form of infrastructure, we have discovered that actually this is a platform and a method which should and could be applied to quite a wide array of technology innovation and next generation technologies that we're in the process of developing or in many cases deploying. It's not simply a strategy which aids us in the 5G and teleco space. It's something which in fact can aid us in the development of quantum computing, artificial intelligence, in terms of technologies that we have as an end user experience, but also in the opposite direction on the technology tree. This is an issue which we should and are beginning to address with regards to things such as semiconductors and microprocessors, the supply chain risk posed by limited diversification in the market, and the locations and the interactions of these companies that are the predominant players in this space with their each state actor presents very similar to risks to the ones that we've noted in 5G and telecoms, and therefore we're also beginning to realize presents the same opportunities for countering those risks and increasing and improving the supply chains and the technologies we produce through these foundational technologies as we progress from here. Now, the great thing also about this is that we've begun to realize as another opportunity that technology and norms and standards of behavior are not disentangled. They are in fact very much entangled. That technology and humanitarian standards and ethics and principles are and do go hand in hand. They are not separate entities that can be discussed in isolation. It's been quite common in the past for technology to be treated as a separate entity and a separate box from the ethics or the principles of states and international institutions. But what 5G and other technologies that are next generation based upon this foundational technology are teaching us, such as computer vision, artificial intelligence, machine learning used for human-machine interaction, is teaching us that actually ethics is fundamentally entwined with this. And the standards of technology, the things which perhaps previously would have been my remit, sat in a boring part of the King's building where no one else would ever really stray, is becoming the thing that people are not only interested in, but recognize as important. And the fact that we need to build the ethics into these programs and technologies at the very beginning. And from a state perspective, that means that the international technical standards bodies that previously were the remit of people like me who talk in numbers and figures and complicated words and lexicons that no one really understands are becoming important and recognized as such again. Institutions like ICANN, the ITU, these are all things that have, for the past 20 years of the internet's existence, kind of continued to operate in relative misunderstanding and a haze of it's there, but it does its job, so do we really need to engage ourselves? We're realizing now the opportunity presented that, one, yes, we perhaps should have been engaged in this more from the very beginning, but now is the time to do so. We can't continue to look back in 2020 hindsight and go, oh, I wish we had done it. That time is past. The opportunity, however, is to redress those issues now and engage more competitively, more fairly, and in a manner designed to make the internet live up to the standards that we hoped it would. That is one which the minister again mentioned, the liberal standards of engagement as a human being or human beings with technology to aid and help us all equally. And that is, I think, fundamentally a big picture component of 5G, and it is a foundational technology. Without it, all of the promises we've been given about next generation use of artificial intelligence or quantum computing or cryptography won't work, or won't work in a manner which benefits all of us as they could. And I think now is the time that we get this right and learn the lessons that we should have learned perhaps 10 years ago, but now is the time. So I'm going to leave it on that positive note rather than the negative one that normally the last couple of years had left me issuing. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Drew, and thanks for adopting that that positive note and the note of opportunity, which is we'll be coming back to you with many questions arising for those statements. But let's now turn to Baroness Neville Jones. Pauline, please let us have your opening remarks. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Emily, and good day to everyone in all parts of the globe. Great pleasure to be here. I thought what I would do, partly as a background and scene setter to a discussion which we will undoubtedly focus very much on cyber and related issues, is I thought I would give a little bit of the context and the political background to where Anglo-Japanese relations are now. I think it's fair to say that the modern relationship between the UK and Japan, which has grown extremely rapidly, has its origins really a bit more than a decade ago, when I think sort of two island nations began to reach out to each other. And interestingly enough, cyber was very much at the center of the relationship from the very beginning. It was the issue that we both took up in cooperation with each other. I think initially it was government to government, but as I think you can see from the panel, let alone anything else, it has now spread much more into a both a technological and a business proposition. I think that both sides, I think, were spurred by shared perception of the need for effective security too, and that was very much a starting point. Both extremely worried about the resilience against electronic attack, and working, I think, from the outset, really, not just at defense and security, but actually most particularly at longer term resilience. It's, I suppose, just worth noting that the relationship between the two countries goes back a long way. And the first sort of formal relationship was the formal alliance of 1905. It's not any longer, I think, the way we do things. Very much more now, it's a question of a living cooperation. And what is interesting, I think, about the way the relationship is developed between two of the countries is that it now spans a very large number of aspects. Mrs. May went to Japan when she was Prime Minister, and from that grew the action plan, and that's been built on subsequently. And we now have, and I'm just going to mention, I think, three things which are signify, I think, the increasing breadth of the relationship. Obviously, the first is the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which was signed. This is partly the result of the UK leaving the European Union, and much of the text has to do with the rollover of provisions relating to the earlier agreement. But what is important about that and different is the provisions relating to data, the opening up of the prospect of data sharing. And I think everyone on the panel is going to agree that it's absolutely fundamental to being able to do serious work, is to be able to share data and to share data in confidence. So I think this is a very important aspect of the relationship, which I think both countries are not only intend to use bilaterally in their relationship, but also I think it's part of the general approach of both of us, to the way in which we want to see the international relationship develop as well. And what Alexei was saying about the free and open internet, which is an objective for both of us. I mean, it cannot work unless you have data flowing freely, but also securely. I think the second thing I'd just like to mention is the joint statement in February of this year, not so long ago, I mean just a month ago, between the four defense and foreign ministers. Now that's quite a long statement, but what it I think indicates is that the two countries really want to broaden a relationship that's developed very well into harder security, into defense cooperation, as well as into security. And there's, I think, quite a lot of commitment there to working on joint capacity building. And I think other speakers will talk more about that. And the statement does say, and I'm going to quote this because I think it's at the key of what we're going to be talking about. They committed themselves to a free, open, peaceful, and secure cyberspace, and to responding to cyber attacks, including by calling out malicious cyber actors and activities. They also committed to working together towards a more diverse, transparent, open, secure, and interoperable 5G networks architecture in order to strengthen cybersecurity, including industry initiatives promoting open architectures and through the multilateral fora, such as the G7. Now that, I think, encompassing really is our agenda. And you can see there's a security element in which the two countries intend to work together to defend themselves against electronic attack and actually make their own systems more secure. But there's also the commitment to working towards an international cyber order, which is open and secure, and two important features, and that they will do this both bilaterally and in fora like the G7, which Alexei's already mentioned. The third thing I just want to mention, which emphasizes, I think, the defense side of this, is the deployment that's going to happen later this year of the UK carrier strike group. And this is our aircraft carrier, Queen Elizabeth, which will have F-35s embarked, and it will go to the Indo-Pacific region for her maiden voyage. And when she's there, she will exercise both with the United States and with the Japanese navies. Now that is, it's in a sense, it's a logical progression. It's also, I think, a move after many years of the UK back to an interest in the Indo-Pacific area and a formal demonstration of intent. It's also, I think, a sign of where we recognize some of the tenser regions of the world developing. And we can't ignore the fact that, unfortunately, sadly, that the tension is rising in that part of the world. The allies need to cooperate with each other, and the allies need to talk. And the UK has other relationships in that area with Australia and New Zealand, as well as with the United States. And I think we'll see more activity on that front. A friendly American commentator remarked that this was a quantum leap, and it is a demonstration, I think, of the way in which focus on defense and military issues is actually moving around the globe. Just say one last thing on cyber. As I said earlier on, I think the origins of our relationship on cyber were really very much government to government. But I think we're now getting to the stage where our exchange of information and our experience over security and resilience, and also our exchange of intelligence, all of those things, I think, are the basis now on which, moving forward to dealing with the next stage of the technology, which Alexei mentioned. I think, quite apart from the H word, I think we are probably in a world where we do want to move in any case more open networks, to have much greater diversification of suppliers, actually have less dependence on more closed networks. And work needs to be done on that. I'm sure Chris will talk about this, but it is important, I think, that the Ofcom, which is the UK regulator, in connection with the digital catapult, is now looking seriously at how one actually brings about the existence of an open architecture network, which is well configured. And in all of that, you need obviously to look at security and reliability. And in that, NEC is one of the partners in this particular endeavor. And I think it shows, I think, that we move to a new stage of cooperation where the results in the end will be joint results. These are, it's not any longer a single nation or indeed a single company endeavor. So I think that what I would say is that I think that the relations between our two countries are now moving forward on a very broad front, which includes, importantly, the private sector. And it's not, I think, not unfair to say that it is a new era in the relations between the UK and Japan. I won't say any more now. There's plenty more to talk about later. Thank you.
Yes, so much in that, and the concept of a living cooperation, and also, you've given that historical perspective, but also highlighted that there's been a particular intensity around that activity in building up those relationships over the last 10 years. And thank you for putting the cyber activity in the context of the need for openness, open networks, in a way bringing the telecommunications networks closer to what we're more familiar with in the internet architecture. But of course, both have problems with diversification, both have problems with competition, and so on. So I'm sure we'll be coming back to the themes that you've raised and that Alexi has raised. But let me turn now to Scott Bailey from the UK's Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. Thank you for joining us this morning, Scott.
Thanks, Emily. It's really great to be here today to discuss the ways in which the UK and Japan can, indeed are, cooperating across this agenda. And I wanted to build a little bit on what the Minister said in his opening remarks, and to briefly set out the approach that we are taking to ensure that our digital technologies are underpinned by secure and resilient telecoms networks, and how we are working together with other countries, including Japan, to achieve this. So in the UK, we carried out our telecom supply chain review back in 2019, which identified two main areas of action: the need to implement a new strengthened framework for telecom security, and the need to address the risk of national dependence in the 5G telecom supply market. To address these challenges, we're taking a new telecom security bill through Parliament as we speak, and we published a 5G supply chain diversification strategy in November last year. And the strategy sets out the UK's vision to achieve long-term change in the global market. And it has three strands. The first strand is around supporting our remaining incumbent vendors, which in the UK's case are Nokia and Ericsson. The second strand is around what we can do to attract new entrants into the UK market. And the third strand is how we can look to accelerate the development of open and interoperable technologies. And I think our ambition is to get to a place where the market, where within the market we see that network supply chains are disaggregated, providing network operators more choice and flexibility as they build out their networks, where we have open interfaces somewhat as default that promote interoperability between vendors, where the global supply chain for components is distributed across regions, creating both resilience and flexibility. Others have mentioned the importance of standards, and we are keen that we see a situation in which standards are set more transparently and independently, and where overall security and resilience is given a priority in our network. And we've committed an initial £250 million to deliver this work. Our focus initially is on diversifying the 5G radio access network, because that is where the review identified the most pressing risks. But we're taking a forward-looking approach that is applicable to future generations of technology. So I guess as far as possible, the actions we're taking now will also be with a view to stimulating innovation and openness openness in the market beyond 5G. Since we published the strategy, we've established an external task force led by Lord Livingston of Parkhead to give us advice on a concrete set of actions that we can take to deliver the strategy. It will report shortly, but has focused in particular on what we can do to address policy and regulatory barriers, looking at what we can do around international standards, the short-term steps that we can take to accelerate the development of Open RAN, critically in a variety of geographies in the UK, and the long-term R&D that we should consider funding to ensure that we build UK capability for the future. But as the Minister said, since the UK only represents around 2% of the global market in telecoms, working with international partners will be central to our approach. The global market is so interconnected, it means that no one country will be able to address this problem on its own. We have ongoing dialogue with a range of partners on this issue, and there are very positive signs of general agreement on the scale of the challenge and appetite for joint working, including, as others have mentioned, through the UK's presidency of the G7. However, in order to sustainably fix this problem, we need to see action in a critical mass of markets, and we will continue to engage both bilaterally and multilaterally with other countries with a view to establishing greater consensus around the actions that we collectively need to take. It's therefore very positive indeed that we have this ongoing dialogue with our partners in Japan. As the Minister made clear in his opening remarks, the UK sees Japan as a crucial partner in this work. And as Pauline noted, this will be building on a long history of cooperation between our two countries. And it is clear that in this area, there is broad alignment in our approach. We've also had very positive engagement with industry partners based in Japan. The Minister highlighted, for example, the commitments that NEC has made to establish a 5G Open RAN Global Centre of Excellence in the UK, which demonstrates the interest there is both in investing in the UK market, but also more broadly about the development of open interface architectures. I hope that through this event, we can continue the dialogue and explore further opportunities for both Japanese and UK companies to cooperate in research and development and to invest both here and in Japan. I look forward to hearing from others today on how we can go further in UK-Japan collaboration on this important issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Scott. And you know, you've, as with other speakers, you've covered how the cooperation between the UK and Japan, it's government, but it's not just government, it's other stakeholders as well. And principally, when we're talking about the supply chain diversification, a focus on industry. I hope that we can come back to the conversation on standards and internet governance. We're going to move now to hear from Mitsuhiro Hishida. I believe that you want to show some slides. So as you're setting up your shared screen, please do that now and then give us your introductory remarks. But so far we've been hearing from the speakers about a variety of issues, you know, the number of areas in which there's scope for cooperation. So please, Hishida-san, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the nice introduction. My name is Mitsuhiro Hishida. I'm a Deputy Director General for International Economic Affairs, MIC Japan. Well, it's my great pleasure to speak on behalf of MIC Japan today. And I'd like to thank my sincere appreciation I'd like to thank the Chatham House or the Royal Institute of International Affairs for organizing this roundtable. Well, the UK is one of the leading countries in digitalization with the first 5G rollout and rich ICT-related services such as fintech. I believe there are a lot of points Japan can learn from. Also, the UK and Japan enjoy a good relationship in the digital field. For example, as my previous speaker mentioned, Japan and UK have just signed the EPA with a new provision including free from data or a ban on unjustified data localization. We expect today's discussion to be an important input to brush up and strengthen UK and Japan's collaborative effort to lead the promotion of secure and open 5G networks. Well, first, I'd like to briefly explain the 5G policy of Japan, focusing on today's theme, 5G security, open RAN promotion, and enhanced cooperation with the UK. So first, 5G security. Okay, 5G is, as my previous speaker mentioned, is expected to be harnessed in every aspect of society, and it's important as a foundation for future social development and economic growth. Therefore, ensuring the safety and security in ICT networks is an urgent and important task. Well, as you see in this slide, in Japan, it was one of the conditions for 5G mobile operators to take adequate cybersecurity measures, including measures against supply chain risks. So this is the condition that we require for the operators at the time of the frequency assignment. And we also introduced the tax incentive. The next slide, please. We also introduced the tax incentives for the secure and open 5G network systems. Only the certified 5G systems are eligible for these tax incentives. So for the tax incentive, as explained, one of the criteria for next slide, please. Oh, it's okay. For tax incentive, there are many some conditions. One of them is openness. So this is how the openness condition goes. And for the requirement of openness, the government reviews whether multi-vendor interconnectivity and interoperability are ensured. Such a requirement for openness aims to offer incentives for carriers to procure all-round compliant equipment. Next slide, please. And also MIC is implementing a technical project to reduce the time and cost for testing on interoperability of all-round devices with operators and vendors in Japan. This is the OTIC in Japan, or Japan in Japan. And as for this year, we will begin financial support for 5G experimental projects using all-round and VLAN technologies overseas by Japanese companies. It is our intention to share the outcome of such projects at the discussion or in multilateral fora such as all-round alliance. In this regard, we appreciate the support of DCMS for the experimental project of NEC in the UK, as Mr. mentioned in our opening remarks. And in our beyond 5G promotion strategy, openness is also mentioned as one of the important elements to realize the next generation mobile network. We would like to engage in 5G policy issues, including openness, with a view to achieve beyond 5G or 6G in 10 years. Well, lastly, let me talk about the importance of enhanced cooperation with the UK and Japan. Issues such as 5G security or vendor diversification requires international coordinated efforts. Therefore, we would like to enhance cooperation with like-minded countries such as UK in this regard. The UK is leading the international discussion on vendor diversification. Especially, we look forward to the discussion at the upcoming G7 ministerial meeting hosted by UK this April. We are very thankful to the initiative of the UK, especially DCMS. Actually, the UK and Japan has been very collaborative on this topic. We have held interagency meeting on this topic last November, and since then, DCMS and MIC have held expert-level meetings on 5G policies 3 times this year. Japan and UK share societal programs such as low birth rates, aging populations, and regional decline. Digitalization can make social participation possible by overcoming factors such as residence, age, disability, and raising children. And therefore, it is extremely important that we create 5G networks that are secure and open. We would like to strengthen our cooperation with the UK to contribute more to secure and open 5G systems, globally utilizing opportunities such as today's workshop. Thank you very much.
Ishida-san, thank you very much for those remarks and also for your emphasis on those 3 areas, 5G security, the promotion of Open RAN, your mention of the use of incentives, which sounds very interesting. I hope we can come back to what you're doing, dig into what you're doing, and the enhanced cooperation between the two countries. And as other speakers, you've mentioned secure and open in the same remarks. This is our objective, to do both, and I hope we can explore those issues. But first, let me turn to our final speaker, Chris Jackson from NEC, the CEO of NEC Europe Limited. Chris, I think you also want to share your screen and give some slides. I can see that happening. Thank you for audience members who've already posted questions in the Q&A. After this, we're going to open up the floor to questions, so please keep your questions coming. And now I'm going to hand over to our final speaker from the panel, Chris Jackson, President and CEO of NEC Europe. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, Emily, so thank you very much indeed, and good morning everyone in the UK, and good evening everyone in Japan, and thank you Chatham House for the opportunity to speak today. I've just got a handful of slides just to really help sort of structure the presentation, and my main focus really is on NEC's commitment to open standards, and just touching upon our real experience in terms of deployment both in Japan, UK and Europe, in actually starting to help this become a reality. Sorry, there's just a bit of a delay in terms of slides coming through. Okay, so the first point to make really is that NEC firmly supports the promotion of open standards and moving away from this oligopoly that we currently have within the UK, where the market is dominated very much by a few vendors. I think we can clearly evidence our commitment in terms of the work that we've done with both NTT and Rakuten in Japan, and I'll touch upon that shortly. Both here in the UK with the work that NEC has done in supporting the UK government on the Telecom security bill, which the Minister touched upon earlier. Our active membership of a number of alliances, such as the ORAN Alliance and the Technical Infrastructure Project, where we're playing, I think, a major part in helping to drive and promote standards, which also was talked about earlier by various panelists. Our joint investment with the UK government in Open RAN trials here in North Wales, and we were delighted to have that opportunity to work very closely with the UK government in making that a reality. And also very recently, we've made a significant investment here in the UK with our 5G Global Centre of Excellence. And I think that will also play a very important part, working with the government's announcements around National Telecoms Lab and Sonic, in helping us actually start to attract new entrants to this market, which will be key in terms of driving open standards. Okay, so in terms of our real Open RAN experience in Japan, we've worked with NTT Docomo on a nationwide commercial deployment of 5G Open RAN, where we provided lightweight radio units, and we provided full multi-vendor interoperability verification as part of this solution. And we've also worked very closely with Rakuten as well, Rakuten Mobile, deploying Open RAN compliant radio units with massive MIMO antenna and cloud native 5G core for Rakuten's fully virtualized end-to-end cloud native network. And I think it's fair to say that both of these opportunities and the work we've done here, this has been very much groundbreaking activities that took place in Japan, which I think was very, very important as a catalyst, as momentum to support the whole move towards open standards. Here in the UK, we've established the 5G Global Centre of Excellence, as I mentioned earlier. What we're trying to do here is to use this as an opportunity to work very closely, as I mentioned earlier, with the National Telecoms Lab and also and Sonic as well, so we can start to really focus on the full interoperability testing with other vendors' products, new entrants, so we can really start to gain and push that momentum in open standards, which will obviously be key to actually making this successful from a scalable perspective. The 5G Centre of Excellence will not just simply focus on co-development and working very closely with the MNOs. It will also have a central engineering unit, and as well as actually having that full end-to-end testing capability. Right now we're in the process of ramping this up, so we're on a major recruitment drive right now within the UK. In fact, one of the first projects that came out of this Centre of Excellence was, in actual fact, was the Open RAN trial we announced in conjunction with the UK government in North Wales. And all of this is backed up by our R&D and our manufacturing and the strategy we have back in Japan. And in terms of, again, showing, I think, our commitment and investment, you've seen the announcement by NEC and NTT, significant investment in terms of this space again. And I think all of that level of investment as well is also going to be crucial to giving momentum to in this drive to make open standards a reality. If I just touch upon now the trial we've done within the UK, as I mentioned, we're very grateful to the UK government in helping NEC showcase not only our capabilities, but our commitment to the UK. So we've had a number of meetings, a lot of activity with DCMS, leading to the announcement of this opportunity. This trial, as I mentioned earlier, will be in North Wales. We are currently now in deep discussions with the North Wales government, with a view to then actually ensuring that this opportunity goes live in 2021. And it's very encouraging to see that also that they are actually being very open with us in introducing us to partners to actually start to make sure that we actually get a real commercialization at the end of this process, which I think will be critical to ensuring that the people of North Wales really do gain and extract the value out of the technology that 5G can bring in that geographical area. We've also, as well as focusing on the UK, we've also announced a number of Open RAN opportunities, trials with Vodafone, with operators such as VodafoneZiggo in the Netherlands. We announced that trial, for example, in October 2020. In December 2020, we're working very closely with Telefonica O2 in Germany in order to bring Open RAN a reality in Germany, in Bavaria. And also, here in the UK, we've just recently, as recently as last month, we've announced a press release with Telefonica O2 here in the UK. So we've got activities on the go, not just in Japan, not just in the UK, but also in Europe as well. And I think this really, hopefully, confirms our commitment to actually to the whole open standards discussion. And finally, this is just the last slide, really, just to touch upon the fact that there's a lot of talk earlier about international collaboration, the importance of driving openness. NEC is very committed to organisations such as the Clean Network, the EU 5G Clean Toolbox. This is going to be, all these sorts of initiatives are very, very important within Open RAN and telecommunication, the likes of the Open RAN Alliance and the TIP project. All of these bodies will be crucial in driving collaboration and driving standards, which also will be key, I think, to providing simplicity and also driving competitiveness and also ensuring that from a price point that we start to see the new players into the industry, which is obviously at the end of the day is what we're all trying to see. So that really concludes my opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Chris, and all of our speakers for setting the scene today. Before opening up to the floor to questions, and I can see we've already got many questions, so I'm just going to just pull out a couple of themes that came across the board. A lot of you mentioned the importance of standards and also the importance of fostering more competition in these markets. If I could just come to the thing about diversification, we've all talked about that. Of course, none of us really went into the fact that the backdrop to this was the exclusion of a supplier, one of 3 suppliers from the UK supply. So, Scott, you mentioned in your remarks that having a lack of diversity in supply creates its own security risks. How does the diversification strategy fit with that sort of exclusion and the growing kind of taking of sides that we're seeing in the network?
Thanks, Emily. I think it's a really good point. I suppose what I would say is that the telecom supply chain review, which I mentioned in my opening remarks, happened sort of in advance of the subsequent decisions that we took in the UK in relation to high-risk vendors in particular, and high-risk vendors in general, and Huawei in particular. and actually sort of almost irregardless of those decisions, identified a much longer term, sort of 15 to 20 year market issue, which has seen huge amounts of consolidation across the global telecommunications market. So to some respects, I suspect that we would be needing to act kind of irregardless of those particular decisions that we've taken in the UK, and indeed other countries are acting or indeed expressing an interest in acting because of the wider benefits in terms of more innovation and competition and resilience, sort of having not taken those particular decisions. So I think perhaps the sort of need to act quickly is greater in the UK as a result of the particular decisions we've taken, but actually there's a sort of much longer term story here, which we kind of would have needed to address in any event.
Thank you very much. Dr. Drew, Alexei, you highlighted the need for us to pay more attention to these organisations like ITU and ICANN, and the way that we've kind of compartmentalised our discussions about technology as maybe it's because we can solve technological problems, but ethical problems start to get very complicated. So it's understandable, isn't it, that technical organisations have wanted to steer away from them. But what happens to those ethical conversations? And maybe Pauline, you can come into this conversation as well about where you have a growing technological superpower that doesn't really share the same values. How do we go about that and maintain openness, interoperability, and the free flow of data?
That's a fantastic question, and one which keeps me up at night more than it probably should, or perhaps just as much as it should. I'd like to answer that and actually go back to one of Scott's points, but I think it's, from my experience of working with technologists and policymakers and really sitting between these two groups and having to speak the language of both, what I find is there's a great tendency of those whose area of expertise is technology to see all problems as technology problems. And there's a great commonality of those who don't work in the technology space to view all problems as also technology problems, but they don't know how to fix them. And the problem is there's this, there then becomes a jarring clash in the middle where the technologists believe that a simple fix to the code or the algorithm or the technology itself can solve what is a broader societal, geopolitical, economic problem. And at the same time, the policy makers or practitioners are also urging them to solve the problem that they believe they have themselves created. In reality, these issues are, as I've stated, not separate. They might have appeared through the lens of technology, but they come out of the basis of a social or geopolitical context in which they rest. And that's as true with the issues of provision of free flow of information and open and secure internet as it is with the concept of, well, what should be possible with machine vision with regards to its infringement upon human activity and behavior and changing that behavior. And these questions do become, in my opinion, they've been critical all along, because that's my particular take on these things, and I wouldn't be in this field if it weren't the case. But when you have a scenario where these dynamics are being significantly shaped by a nation state or a regional set of nation states where those values are so significantly at odds with another larger proportion of nation states, that is when we are forced to confront this reality. And to move along from the telecoms communication, if you look at, for example, the companies that are purveying CCTV cameras into the UK, there's a recent interesting report done on London boroughs and who they are buying their CCTV equipment from. And it turns out a huge amount of it is Hikvision, a Chinese company that also has given significant investment in R&D to the use of the same camera systems in Xinjiang. And if that is the case, why? Is that a problem? Should it be a problem? And if it is, what do we do about it? Yeah. I'd point out that I believe there's at least one borough, I think it's, I can't remember quite which one, that has a policy where they will not purchase technology from these companies. Now, is that the right policy? Is it the right motivations for that policy? Is it an effective policy? And these are the questions that we now need to be asking. But to come back to,
I'm just going to, I'd love to hear more from you, Alexei, but I'm conscious that Pauline wants to come in on this question, and I'd like to hear from you on this and you know, just the wider diplomatic and cybersecurity aspects of these difficult issues we're trying to solve?
I mean, it's one of the fundamental questions that you're raising. I think, to put it in very simple terms, actually moving in this space is actually part of the defense of the liberal order and the rules that we have built up as democracies since the Second World War, which embody, we hope, the values that we stand for. We have to defend them. And what it means is, in practice, that if you're not active in these areas, others will be. So we need actually to be makers of the standards and then defenders of those standards, whether they're ethical or whether, frankly, they're technical. And technical standards need to be ethical. So I think it's actually part of a bigger, wider issue of whose values are actually going to be the ones by which the world runs. So sorry.
That's a fascinating point. And do you think that we've sort of been a bit complacent about that? Yes. Or that we've been a bit rusty? We're going to have to sort of learn new skills about that, aren't we?
Well,
if we're going to force...
I think we've never entirely vacated the space. But I think that one of the things we have to be careful about is that international bodies like the ITU aren't captured actually by people who want to pursue autocratic systems and nationalistic systems and break up what is otherwise a worldwide system. So not only do we actually have to advance our values and standards with them, but we actually have to ensure that the international bodies through which we've been operating are capable of actually taking that cause forward. And there, we have, I think, allowed quite a lot of counterweight to us to build up. So we do need to be a good deal more active. I don't think we've ever entirely lost the game, but we need to be active and we need to recapture ground. And I think, if I might say so, you made the good point that a lot of our interest in open architecture stems from the exclusion of a provider. I have to say, however, that I think that it's also a bigger problem, which is that governments have become extremely concerned, and I think not without cause, of these very big oligopolies that are developed. And we have oligopolies in the West. We have the social media companies, which are huge, dominant, and which are laying down all sorts of rules for the behavior of societies, which in principle really belong to the sphere of government rather than private sector. So I think that, as I said in my remarks, I think we were ready in many respects for moving to more open systems where things like Open RAN then become extremely relevant. So not only do I think it was a particular problem in that we got ourselves into very small number of suppliers in vertically integrated systems, we do actually, I think, need to move to systems that are more open, less dependent, less exclusive, and we need to carry that message right across not just telecoms but into other media as well.
Thank you very much for that. And of course, it's ironic, isn't it, that we are worried about the oligopolies in the internet sphere, which is replete with open standards. So openness is, of course, a really important part of it, but we also need to take care of competition. And I think that this leads us to you, Hishida-san, with your enormous experience of negotiating in international fora. If you could just give us some reflection on the commonalities of interest between the UK and Japan and how that is working out in standards bodies and how we can support each other within standards or other areas. And then I'm going to come to you, Chris. Thank you very much, Hishida-san.
Thank you very much. I listened to the discussion of the previous speaker very carefully, and I really understand that we have much in common. We have same societal programs like aging society and the decline of the regional area and so on. Well, I think ICTs, including 5G, is expected to be harnessed in every aspect of society and important as a foundation for future social development and economic growth. Therefore, ensuring safety and security in ICT networks is an urgent and important task. Meanwhile, as my previous speaker mentioned, there's also a growing concern that ICT technologies, which are making rapid progress, might bring about dark scenarios such as a surveillance society, debating on how it is used. We believe it's important to foster ICT solutions that respect privacy and human rights and the norms regarding usage of ICTs. And as for the standard, I noticed that, for example, China suggests to have some smart city standard in some standardization body like ISO or ITU. And it seems to me that this kind of standard is more like aiming to achieve a surveillance society in smart city. And I think in that case, we have a very severe concern, and I understand UK also share this concern. And I think for this kind of the international forum, Japan and UK can share our concern and we should promote our dialogue to achieve more free and open and more human rights respectful technologies. This is my idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ishida-san. And I understand that your colleagues from Japan were pushing back very strongly against some standards last week in ITU. So I think that's an example of that cooperation and that sharing of interests in action. Thank you for that. Chris Jackson, thanks for giving us a really inspiring overview of what's happening in your Open RAN rollout and how you're working with others and that you're doing nationwide trials across Japan. Alexi and I were giving evidence to the Public Bills Committee a few weeks ago, and one of the other witnesses said, really, in their opinion, Open RAN wasn't yet scalable enough to roll out nationwide, and that in fact NEC and other competitors like you were probably the best chance of diversification in the immediate term. What would you say to that? Is that wrong?
Look, I think whenever there's any new technology, things are always potentially hard to begin with, and there are some challenges about introducing Open RAN, but I think we need to focus on the opportunities rather than just focusing on the obstacles. And if you look at there's been discussions around 2G being a potential issue. Maybe there needs to be some more work around dealing with that particular concern. I know there's been some discussions in some countries about looking at maybe having one operator to handle that particular issue. We also need to do, I think, things such as maybe Japan has done. It's very interesting to see the incentives that Japan has put in place, and that clearly has been a carrot, and it certainly worked in terms of driving increased volumes and ensuring that the price point, which obviously is so critical on Open RAN, is starting to be achieved in Japan. So that in itself is key to adoption. But I think I think there's really a momentum now to make this happen. I mean, you've seen recently the likes of Vodafone have talked about the fact that 2,600 of their sites, or I don't know, 15% I think that is of their 18,000 sites will go Open RAN. We're seeing a number of the MNOs now pushing this. So I think you need a bit of combination of carrot and stick, and we need to push this. Another point I would make is, I made this earlier in my presentation, that the National Telecoms Lab, Sonic, this is driving investment, it's attracting new entrants, and anything we can do to make the ability for small companies, new entrants come into this market, that in itself is going to drive adoption. That in itself is actually going to speed up Open RAN. But I guess in a nutshell, maybe government can do more, maybe the MNOs have got to do more, and maybe the vendors have got to do more. But if we all come together and collaborate, then I think this is the best way of making this happen.
Thank you very much. And in answering that question, I think you actually answered a question by George Hallas, who was saying how many levers can government pull to implement a move to interoperable systems. what is the current thinking about carrot and stick and other incentives. And I think yourself and Hishida-san really covered off the use of incentives and how successful that can be. I think often we think of regulators as people who just sort of bash people and intervene to correct distortions in the market, but there were some very interesting examples there of creative use of incentives. I'm going to go through some of the questions. Thank you very much to the audience for your questions in Q&A. Please do keep them coming. I think that I'm going to come to Patrick Flynn's question. Is the relationship between the UK and Japan cyber diplomacy, and does it address data privacy and security? Are there there are key parts of global interconnectivity being purchased by tech giants, and what are the panel's view on this? Pauline, Neville Jones, you talked about the worrying oligopolies, and I think Patrick Flynn's question is sort of diving down into the network. We're seeing the same names right down into the undersea cables, and we're also seeing geopolitical movement in undersea cables, with some players saying we're not going to be part of that one, we're going to build our own. So could I just turn to you with this question about the cyber diplomacy and how it addresses issues like data privacy, security, and just expand on that point that you were making about the oligopolies and what to do?
Yes, well, I mean, clearly the security of the physical links is a major issue, and it's a combination of them being a good repair, also being well defended, and frankly, that's where what might regard as being old-fashioned defence comes in. One of the things that I think is happening in the UK is that we are reverting to our traditional role of being a maritime power. And I think one of the things you will see, so I think that there's a lot there. Clearly, government and the usually private sector company operating those cables has also to work closely together. And we have to be mindful of the kind of things that, I'll give you an example. The Danish government found a Russian so-called trawler very interested in the coastline of Greenland, which is over which Denmark's sovereign. And it all turned out to be actually tapping into the cable, into one of the communications cables. So this is both a long-standing issue, and also obviously it takes on a modern guise. You asked another part of the question. Oh yes.
About data privacy, because often these are put up as sort of, you can have security or privacy, choose one.
You've got to have both. You've got to have both. There's no doubt. Now, countries are increasingly having domestic legislation of the kind, which lays on the state and on operators very considerable obligations, and GDPR is there. In our international operations, you can't ignore your legal both the constraints of the law, and also the government can't ignore the fact that it must enforce that legislation. So that provides a starting point for ensuring that the data that flows along the networks is itself properly protected. And one has, I think, to see this obviously in its two aspects: is the network secure, and is the data on it secure? And that is a whole other area of government to government, but also government and private sector cooperation. I think that the foundations for all of that are there. What one has to ensure, if we move to Open RAN, is that the data is offered an equal degree of security as we would hope and expect it does have at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have a question here from Will Stewart. Open architectures are often software-based and thus tend to use more electrical power. We haven't actually talked about sustainability in this conversation. So Will Stewart is asking, how should resilience and sustainability be balanced in this COP26 year? Who would like to have a go at that? Anybody? I'm going to pick somebody. Alexia.
Oh, go on.
So shall we go to Scott? We haven't heard from you for a while, so let's go to you, Scott, and then a couple of words from you, Alexi. Thank you.
I was just going to say, I think Will's question speaks to a kind of broader set of questions as we look to sort of make Open RAN comparable with the existing technology that we have, which are how do we make sure that it kind of delivers at least as good outcomes for operators across a range of different areas, including kind of use of power, security, which others have mentioned. And that's exactly what we're really looking to do in the UK through sort of funding research and development, is why we're so excited about the work that NEC and others are doing. And I know the same is true of the Japanese government. We need to get to a place where operators sort of by choice can deploy Open RAN, because it's genuinely as good, if not better, for them to deploy it as the kind of existing proprietary system. So I think it's really important that we look at a whole range of these things as we develop the technology.
I would just like to echo what Scott has said. As someone who's in government, it's good to hear it, because my point would be, as head of the G7, as host of the COP26, it is the time and place for us to recognise that, as I've already stated, technology is inseparable from the other standards and things that we are caring more and more about. And that is as true for humanitarian and ethical concerns as it is for environmental. And the UK has a perfect opportunity now to leverage, talking of the levers of power to be used, its position in these multiple organisations and institutions to actually ensure that that happens this time. And I'm very pleased to see that Scott is saying that that's something that's on their mind. So that's good to hear.
Thank you very much. Could I just ask you, Chris, from an industry perspective, how far is sustainability, front of mind for you in NEC and others in the technology sector at this time?
So very much so. I think any company that ignores this, ignores it at its peril. So I think this is becoming more and more important, and you'll see this becoming a topic which I think starts to dominate more and more. So, and in terms of answering your question, I mean, the key really is less hardware, less power. So I think companies like ourselves are having to focus an awful lot when we're actually producing and developing new products to ensure that power consumption is obviously a very clear KPI. So that's as I say, that's going to be critical, I think, to companies being successful moving forward.
Thank you very much. George Hallas is asking, he's framing this question in the UK, but actually I would like to come to you, Hishida-san, on this. What other parts of the network need investment to allow the benefit of full 5G, both in Japan? Well, maybe we could come to you for Japan. Are there any other aspects that we need to be talking about, to George Hallas's question here, in terms of investment and the work that you are undertaking? Maybe you can also elaborate on some of your use of incentives to stimulate competition in the domestic market. Thank you.
Yes. Actually, we for our government promoting the 5G that to accelerate the deployment of the 5G is a priority for us. And as I briefly mentioned in my opening remarks, we have this tax break system for promoting investment in 5G. We have some three criteria. Whether this telecom operator have a security or trustworthiness, and stability, whether they have a stability of supply, and whether they have an openness or not. So we review the telecom carrier or vendors based on these criteria: security or stability or openness. And if they fulfill such a criteria, we can give this tax break incentives. So by doing that, we are trying to promote this 5G deployment and achieving a full 5G in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a question from Yuka Koshino, which is that some UK telecom operators have been deploying open network architecture in third countries like Africa. Mr. Bailey has mentioned that the UK market is only 2% of the global market. But is there ongoing discussions between the UK and Japan to cooperate in deploying 5G Open RAN in third countries in Africa and the Middle East, similar to mechanisms in the US, Japan digital cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region? Hishida-san, I can see you nodding to this, and is this something that you would like to address? And Scott, the question is addressed to you, so maybe Hishida-san, if you have any remarks on that, please share them.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, I'm also in charge of the US, and actually Japan, US is now talking about how we can overreach the third countries, like ASEAN countries, and to how we can tell them how secure open secure networks can benefit them. Actually, we from this fiscal year we have this budget to do some experimental work overseas to use this 5G open RAN 5G networks. Well, actually, the good example is UK. Actually, since the NEC already mentioned, we are NEC according to the scheme of the DCMS. NEC is undertaking some 5G experimental projects in the rural area of the UK, and we are very appreciate this. This experimental project by the DCMS, and we'd like to expand this kind of the 5G experiment overseas in the third countries in collaboration with like-minded countries like Japan, Japan, US, or Japan, UK collaboration. This is our plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll turn to you, Scott Bailey, for that question, and maybe reflect on the praise from Hishida-san of what the UK is doing.
We're very grateful for any praise, so thank you to Hishida-san for that. And I can only really agree with his comments. I suppose the question talks to the sort of global nature of the market, which I alluded to, and as the questioner says, we have several companies operating in the UK which are sort of global companies. Vodafone, Telefonica operate in a number of markets, and where they want to, we are talking to them, industry to government, about in other markets they're operating in, how can we support them to kind of do what they want to do in those markets. And my colleagues in the Department for International Trade have lots of conversations about that. And then, as Hishida-san said, I think there's then more that we can do government to government level. We've all alluded to the work that's ongoing through the G7, but it very much doesn't stop there. And I think we're really keen from the UK's perspective to build consensus and alignment about both the broad principles of the need to act, and then looking at the specific things that we can do to actually promote and fund and develop these technologies more widely across the world.
Yeah, and of course, Chris Jackson mentioned the ongoing projects that NEC is involved in the Netherlands, Germany, and so on. Just in the last few minutes, if I may, I'd like to just cover one more question from the audience. It's from Will Stewart, who says the key driver to undiverse technical solutions is the economies of scale, which is why we all use only 2 mobile smartphone systems, for example. There's a staggering figure, isn't there, that 2 companies represent 99.75% of the global market in mobile operating systems. So this is also more attractive to users. How can one make diversity attractive? And I think this is probably something we could just go for quick remarks to all of our panel. Chris, can I start with you, and then I'll go to Pauline, and then Alexi, and then we'll finish up with Scott and Hishida-san, if I may. So Chris, to you.
I guess it's a balance. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we have to drive diversity. Yes, we have to have a balance in terms of obviously the impact, the positive impact for end users, but we have to find a way of making it successful. As simple as that.
And it takes a lot of investment, doesn't it? These are not markets where you can just show up and compete nationally.
Yeah.
Thank you. I can't remember who I said next. I think it was you, for Pauline. Thank you.
I think I mean, I'd add to what Chris just said. I mean, you've got to make it competitive. So price count. So that's another, I think, another of the constraints. I mean, it'll start capturing the market when it can actually compete from the point of view of price. I would just add, I think that we need to think in terms of packages. I mean, the point that was mentioned earlier on about the need for power. I mean, power, the provision of power is actually a challenge for the whole of the fourth industrial revolution. It's not just what we're talking about, but almost all other aspects. So we need actually to ensure as states and as governments that actually the underlying networks and capacity of the country actually to bear these new technologies is available. So it's more than just actually what the private sector does to ensure that new ways of doing things take off.
Thank you very much. Alexei Drew.
I would like to say that despite that 97.5% number, it's important to recognize that different user bases have different requirements and capacities. There's a reason why Apple is not the most prominent provider in, say, India or African nations, because the requirements and capacities are different. So if we're trying to create diversification, what we need to do is recognize that there are different needs for different markets, and we need to find a way to be able to tailor our diverse strategies and diverse operators to different markets and make them attractive and effective in each of those markets. And that's really what satisfies the end user.
Thank you very much. Scott Bailey.
Thanks. I mean, I think the question sort of hits on the nose why this is such a difficult problem to address, not just in this particular market, but in others where there's been similar consolidation. I suppose what's perhaps different this time around is, as others have mentioned, there seems to be an alignment between government sort of desires on security and resilience and operators and industries' desires around increased flexibility in how they deploy their networks. And I think that's why we're so excited about the possibility that open architectures sort of provide, because they do sort of present that opportunity to kind of address those barriers that the question alludes to, perhaps for the first time.
Thank you very much. Hishida-san, thank you.
Well, I can say that maybe if the telecom operators adopt these open LAN networks, they can choose from the different vendors, and that I think in the total they can reduce the cost for the deployment of the network, and I think this can be the merit for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all keeping your final remarks so concise that we've even got a couple of minutes in hand. There are two more questions from the audience. Carolyn Kimber, just a very operational point. For those of you who shared slides, would it be possible to share those slides with the participants? That would be gratefully received. And also a final question from Will Stewart. In the light of Kazuo Ishiguro's recent book, Clara and the Sun, when can we expect solar-powered smartphones? I think this sort of comes to the point that we were just talking about, the need to think it very much in the round about consumption and security. But I would like to thank all of our panelists today, Alexei Drew, Baroness Neville Jones, Scott Bailey, Chris Jackson, and Matsuhiro Hishida, for taking us through the complexities surrounding these problems, but also the opportunities, and this sort of comes back to Alexei's opening remarks, the opportunities that we now have. You know, the UK's position in the world is changing, and that any change brings with it opportunities. And there does seem to be a lot of excitement around the opportunities and the like-mindedness between the UK and Japan, and also the complementarity of our different skills and economic strengths, where we can support each other, we can raise our voices in international fora, we can collaborate in business. And as Pauline Neville Jones said in her early remarks, you know, these are living, these collaborations are living things. They are not just to sign an agreement in 1905 and then go away. And it spans across not only government, industry, but also civil society. There are also challenges too. We're facing the challenge of a technological superpower that does not share our values. And as the speakers have reflected, this is going to be an ongoing challenge as we face the years ahead. So the UK's presidency of the G7 provides us with an opportunity to raise our voice and to make an impact, but the work will continue, I think, in the medium and long term. So I would like to thank all of our audience for joining us here today. We're all looking forward to the time when we can be together physically in Chatham House and well, just anywhere actually. But on your behalf, I would like to thank the Minister, Matt Warman, for opening the session today, the excellent staff at Chatham House who put together this programme, and to thank all of our speakers for guiding us through these complex issues. So with that, I'm going to close the session with thanks to you all. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed.